All right. Thanks everybody for joining us for our May 25th Courtney City Council council meeting. I just want to start off by recognizing we are meeting on the traditional unceded territories of the Comox First Nation. And due to the coronavirus COVID-19 emergency, the City of Courtenay, with the authority of Ministerial Order M139, local government meetings and bylaw processes COVID-19, has implemented changes to its open council meetings. In the interest of public health and safety, public in-person attendance at council meetings will be prohibited until further notice. Council meetings will be presided over by the mayor or acting mayor with electronic participation by council and staff. Meetings are available for viewing via live web streaming or video recording at the City of Courtenay website, and will start at 1 p.m. during this period. All right, and we do have some minutes if somebody would like to move adoption.
I'll move adoption.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved by Councillor McCollum, seconded by Councillor Morin. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding the minutes? And I do see Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that I noticed that congratulations are in order for Councillor Cole Hamilton for the Climate Caucus Vice Chair nomination and I guess election. So I just wanted to say congratulations to him on that. And I'm happy that we have such great representation locally on that.
Fantastic. Thanks for bringing that up.
Thanks, Wendy.
Yeah, absolutely. Great job, Councillor Cole Hamilton. And again, big kudos for stepping up for that. And you know, I know you've gone to various conferences on behalf of the city, making sure that we are represented and that you're bringing that information back to us, which is absolutely important. But to have a position of, I don't want to call it power. I don't want to necessarily go to your head, but I think it is really worthwhile to be out there and see no further questions or comments. Unless anybody has any issues, I'm going to expect that minutes are adopted unanimously by everybody, and I don't see anybody anything to the contrary. And so we'll move into staff reports and presentations, and we have the Courtenay District Historical Society MOU.
Mayor, I'm prepared to move the recommendation that based on the May 25th, 2020 staff report, Courtenay District Historical Society MOU, Council adopt option 1 and approve the attached MOU, and that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute the MOU on behalf of the city.
I'll second.
All right, Councillor Hillian moved it, Councillor McCollum seconded it. And Councillor Hillian, I do see your hand up. Did you want to speak to the motion?
No, Mayor, I had my hand up to move it, so.
All right, thanks very much. Mr. Allen, did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'd like to turn this over to Dave Snyder, who can summarize the report, take questions from council.
Excellent.
Thank you through the CEO to Mayor and Council. Before I use a draft MOU to identify the idea of mutual intent of using the property at 243 4th Street for potential museum expansion. What this does is revisits communication from 2010 when the property was originally purchased. I'm going to go through just a little bit of the history on it. The intent of the MOU is so that the museum can seek funding for analysis and business case to see if there's potential to move forward. In 2010, the Courtenay District Museum entered into a purchase agreement with the seller with the intent to purchase the property, realizing partway through that the property would actually ultimately be owned by the city. They communicated with the CAO of the day to assign their place in that purchase agreement over to the city. We have that on record, and they had originally asked for the city to affirm the intent for it to be used for museum purposes. Council of the day didn't want to bind the city's hands for tenancy between then and when the building is used, so rejected that idea. We don't find a resolution on hand for this original purchase, so I can't refer back to that. However, now the museum had identified with the provincial fossil designation of the elasmosaur, as well as a dino discovery in the area. There's increased interest in the museum for research, as well as exhibit space and storage of fossil evidence for the West Coast. So they're wanting to investigate the opportunity to expand. There are key steps identified in the MOU, and that is a facility needs assessment, an options analysis, a business case, and then a final agreement that would be signed. The agreement is non-binding and it doesn't commit the city to expenses. So I'll take any questions.
All right, and Councillor Frisch, you had your hand up. You want me to?
Yeah, no, I got it. I thought all day was, I thought I had it, but I don't. So did the, well, thanks for the report, Dave. Did the Courtney District Museum Society pay for that lot? Do we know who paid for it in particular?
Through the CAO, no, the city paid for it. Okay.
And I guess I don't see a timeline in the report. Is there an idea of how long this might take, or you know, what the process is going to be?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's as you can imagine, with everything COVID related, timelines are difficult to establish. Prior to COVID, we had discussed the idea of, since several cultural partners are in need of potential space, this is pre-COVID, there was a desire to work together to see if there's any synergies that could be found in the space that we currently have, and to do an evaluation that's a little bit more comprehensive. So I think at this time, especially being with COVID being a factor now, avoiding timelines is a good thing. So there's a lot less known than there is unknown.
Yeah, it seems like it's complicated at this point to see how it's going to go forward. So I also want, and reading through the agreement, it seems like there's it leaves us open to other multi-purpose uses other than just cultural. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, that was a deliberate inclusion for sure.
Okay, thanks very much.
Mr. Snyder, I'm just wondering if the current tenants are aware of, just because this is an open meeting, that they're aware of sort of the proceedings?
Absolutely. Current tenant there is the Boys and Girls Club. They're on a month-to-month lease with us, and they've been aware for a number of years that that building is in decline and that there may be a need for them to move. We have been in regular communication with them as well to ensure that, there's no surprises to them.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to staff for the report. I'm just wondering if Mr. Snyder might be able to give us a bit of an update on the financial implications of the COVID crisis and the last couple of months of shutdown on our cultural institutions, in particular the museum in this case.
Yeah, thanks for that question as well. It is, I'd say the story is yet to be told. We do have some accounting of it. I know that Sid Williams Theatre is likely the most directly hit in that they had ticket sales that they had to refund. They were great, by the way, in terms of customer service and ensuring that they refunded all purchased tickets to their customers. I know that as an example, Ticketmaster has been very difficult for other people to deal with. And so Sid Williams Theatre is getting great reviews on that side in doing that. But that was, I believe the number was about $80,000 worth of refunds that was difficult for them to swallow, and a lot of transactions, each one of those hard fought. So the museum and the art gallery are a little more difficult because they're less tied to direct revenue as the Sid Williams Theatre is. However, there are staff costs that they're continuing to incur. And so the COVID-19 situation is setting them back as well. There are some granting opportunities and some supports from higher levels of government, but we haven't tallied that all up yet and haven't really, I don't have a concise summary of where they're at. I think there's more story to be told there in the future.
Thanks for that. And can we assume that you're in contact with those organizations with regards to them developing reopening plans?
You bet. Yeah, that's a great question too. We have a weekly Zoom meeting with the cultural partners. It's actually been an interesting finding from this period, is that they found that they're communicating more, and they're communicating more with us on a regular basis. We're actually enjoying the meeting weekly. We are working through scenarios. You may be aware that the reopening, the provincial reopening plan identifies that museums and art galleries are in the phase that we're currently in. And so what we'll come to council with is a request for policy that would identify the relaxation of the closing of those facilities, such that they can start to work toward meeting the requirements and open. Of course, we are working with them on WorkSafe requirements and all of the various industry requirements to open up, including signage and floor markings and otherwise. And they'll submit those requirements to us for approval. Their tenancy agreement, or in their case, their license to occupy, identifies that they have to comply with all regulations and applicable laws. We may modify that with a bit of a COVID caveat to say, and all guidelines as well, because some of these are guidelines more than law. And then they'll submit those to us, and we'll ask council for approval to initiate a reopening.
Good to hear. Thanks very much.
All right, and Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks again. So yeah, good to hear about those plans moving forward, David, or at least the intent to get them going. That's great. I had a question about adding maybe a bit of color to this MOU. Are there any particular needs that have been identified already by the museum? What space might be used for in particular?
Yeah, thanks for that. They have a couple of initial thoughts. Right now, their storage space, their archive space, is in the basement, as well as in separate sites. They have, I believe, 2 other sites where they store exhibits. And they would really like to bring those sites all back to the one location. When researchers come to do any work, they're having to move between sites to look at exhibits and to work on those exhibits. Also, with the change to paleontology being a really important part of what they do, these are heavy exhibits. And so having a site that's well set up for that would be great. Also, climate control being really important. The existing old post office is functioning very well for them. So they're not looking for a change from the existing facility, only expansion of it. On top of that, then there's exhibit space and meeting space that they need as well for education and otherwise.
Thank you very much.
All right, I don't see any further questions. Councillor Theos, did you have any comments or questions? Well, I think we're good. I'll poll council then on the vote, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
And Councillor Theos.
In favor.
Excellent, and I'm in favor as well, so that's unanimous. All right, and we'll move right along. Next, we have the lease agreement for the Courtney Airpark.
Mr. Mayor, I wonder if we might hear from staff first on this before making or moving the resolution.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. Mr. Allen, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I in turn will turn this over to Baron Guderjon, who's the manager of purchasing and who authored and did the work on this report.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So the report that you have in front of you is, excuse me, is for a 5-year lease term with 3 additional 5-year renewal terms between the city and the Courtney Airpark Association. The lease agreement itself has 2 additional points to it. One being the Airpark Association would like the opportunity to appeal the value of the property assessment through BC assessment. That in turn to lower their taxes, which they pay on behalf of the city. And then the second item was to add a zoning provision whereby the city and the Airpark Association would be working cooperatively to look at any potential zoning that the Airpark Association is interested in. That I believe are the main changes. The Airpark Association has met recently with Mayor Wells regarding zoning, and I believe they have been directed to work with the OCP process in order to integrate their needs with the OCP process and make it all one guidance document with their vision included. We have also added to the lease agreement the license of occupation for the floatplane ramp, which was delegated by the Ministry of Lands for a 30-year term. And in addition, the floatplane dock has been surveyed and added to the agreement as well. And yeah.
Excellent. And yeah, I did meet with them last week, and as you mentioned, I did recommend that they be in contact with the OCP, which they said they'd already been talking to TAT. So it sounds like that's moving forward. And I think in terms of the land value assessment, they talked about a potential of having an Airpark zone potentially or something like that, or one that would be regular Airpark and then maybe Airpark commercial for the commercial enterprises that are on the properties there. So yeah. With that, Mr. Allen, did you want to speak further to it?
No, actually, that was just a mistake on my part. So just ignore that.
No, it's all good. Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just have one question. Thanks to staff for putting this together. In the staff report, it says that it says that each of the renewals are subject to city approvals. And I was looking through the contract and I couldn't quite see that. I was wondering if staff could just tell me a bit more about that, please.
So within the lease agreement, we do have the option at the end of each 5-year term to review the needs of the city and to review the any changes or recommendations for improvement or whatsoever, or in addition to, and
could you just tell me which? I was looking at the renewal clause and I could be just misunderstanding it. I didn't see it there. Is it somewhere else in the contract? The term you're talking about?
Is in, yes.
Perhaps this is maybe an earlier draft, but I just couldn't seem to locate that part.
Yes, I'm.
I'm seeing in section, John here, in section 3, Baron. Page 33 of 60 on the agenda.
That's the renewal section, yeah.
The renewal section.
Yeah, no, I see that, but I couldn't see where the city approvals were in there.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
sorry,
I'm not.
my error. I must have. That is, yeah, that's not. It's not in there.
And if it's not in there, would it make sense to add that maybe to an amendment and maybe have that come back to us, or?
Yes.
Okay. And we can continue on with the questions right now, I think. And then if somebody's able to find it, we can maybe circle back and take a look. And if not, then we can bring it. If that.
Great, thanks very much. That was the question I had. So I appreciate staff looking into that.
All right, thanks, Councillor Cole-Hamilton and Councillor Frisch. You're still muted.
But I lowered my hand, so. Yeah, I had a question about the staff report, which highlighted that comparables were difficult to find when talking about the lease rate, or I believe it was the value of the properties. Was that what that was? And I was wondering, it mentioned that there are some other Airparks on the island, like Campbell River. Do we know how they operate? Who owns them? You know, what the cost is of running those facilities and such?
We don't know exactly what the cost to operate is. However, I have talked to the airport manager in Campbell River. I wasn't able to talk to the manager in Qualicum or Paula River, even though I did reach out to them. The city of Campbell River operates their airport. It is a commercial facility, and they have scheduled airline service and so forth. But so they are operating it through their own funding, and with some funding through Transport Canada, I believe, from the information I've been given. But they receive all the revenue that is generated by the airport, and they have an expense plan based on that model, versus our airport, which is only for a smaller population of aircraft and not generally for commercial revenue.
Yeah, I guess that would make sense that Campbell River is a different class of airport and running more business through it. Though I understand that our airport also has some businesses running out of it. Are you familiar with that aspect of the operations there?
Yes, and those businesses are running through their own lease terms for lots 1 to 4, and those businesses are generating income, and a portion of which the city receives as a rental.
Okay, thanks very much.
All right, Mr. Allen, did you put your hand up again?
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so I've taken a look here at this section 3 on renewal, and I recall previous conversations about bolstering that section a little bit, and so thanks to Councillor Cole-Hamilton for sort of highlighting that need to or desire, I guess, to have a review. Right now, the way it reads, it's the tenant has the right to exercise any extension without the city having the same sort of involvement, I guess you could say. So it's a natural the way I read it is it's just an extension based on the desire of the tenant. So I'd like to suggest that perhaps we bring this back to the next meeting and address that inconsistency, I guess, with what's in the staff report and what's in the actual section of the agreement or the lease. So I'll just offer that up.
Okay. All right. And I think we just got a couple more questions. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I think under the circumstances, option 2 in the staff report, that we refer it back to staff for further consideration is appropriate. So I'll move that.
I'll second that.
And on related discussion, I did have one other question, if I could.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it does relate to the separate lease arrangements with other tenants. Originally, I was going to ask about section 5, which speaks to purpose and use of premises, and it specifies aviation purposes only, and no other purpose other than educational. And it was my understanding that there was some aircraft maintenance and other related industry operating there, and that there was in fact a desire to potentially attract more of that type of industry, which would also generate employment. Is that what the Airpark people want to talk to us about in relation to zoning, or is that some other desire on their part?
No, that's exactly what they're after. I'd like to speak further to that and to see what options council would be would endorse them for.
Thanks. And my other question, I was just curious about the length of time it's taken for this agreement to come before us, given that it's I think it goes back to the to actually the last council when the resolution was passed regarding the term of the next lease. Have there been particular difficulties in this negotiation that we should be aware of?
No, the delay has been on my plate. Just busy, and hasn't been anything to do with the other parties.
Okay, thank.
Yeah, if I might jump in, thank you.
Yeah.
That's not entirely my understanding, but John Ward, maybe you can speak to that.
Yes, through the CEO to Mayor and Council, it's been a combination. Barrett, yes, we had some time constraints for staffing, but also the Airpark Association, they weren't necessarily happy with the agreement. So Barrett's been working a lot back and forth with them to come up with a suitable agreement that they're satisfied with. So it's not just us.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, and my conversation with them last week, they didn't seem unhappy with the timeline, and so it didn't sound like anybody was frustrated from their side either. So I think everyone has been communicating. I think at least that's the impression I got from them. So, and Councillor McCollum.
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, thank you for the report. I'm not sure if it makes more sense to ask questions about it now or when it comes back. Should I proceed with asking my question, or should we wrap up the discussion? I'm fine either way.
Yeah, I guess to me, if there's a question that might impact it coming back to us, like how it comes back, if there's something that might affect it in some way, then it might make sense to say it now. But if you think it's something that's more innocuous and maybe won't affect anything, then
yeah, I think it's fairly innocuous. Maybe I'll just leave my questions until we discuss it next time.
Okay, Mr. Allen, you're okay with that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't see any further questions or comments at this point. Councillor Theos, we're just going to call a question here. Did you have any comments before we do that? I'll take your silence as a no, and I'll poll council. Councilor Cole-Hamilton,
In favor.
Councilor Frisch,
In favor.
Councilor Hillian,
In favor?
Councilor McCullum,
In favor.
Councilor Moran,
In favor.
Councilor Theos,
I'm in favor.
and I'm in favor as well. So we'll see that come back to us. All right. Thanks for the good discussion. Next, we have external reports and correspondence. And there's a letter of response from the Honorable Jonathan Wilkinson, Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
I'll move receipt.
Second.
And did staff want to speak to this letter? If not, I'll just briefly speak that it is regarding the City of Courtenay, the letter sent to the provincial and federal government seeking recognition of the current climate crisis and requesting resources be allocated to equip local governments in the response to climate change. And again, I think this is something, especially for coastal communities, but I think communities across Canada are facing all sorts of various challenges in regards to this. So, yeah, so. All right, and unless there's anyone in opposition, I'll just, Councillor Frisch, you had a comment or a question?
Well, I was just going to quickly thank you. I can't remember if this was a council initiative or if this was your own, but do you remember?
I believe it was probably a combination. That's my recollection. Mr. Ward, do you remember? Or?
Yeah, it may have been Will's actually. Now that
I think it was part of the climate crisis resolution back last May.
Yeah.
So I really just wanted to thank you and Councillor Cole-Hamilton and the rest of council for sending that out, because obviously it's showing great alignment with what our senior governments are doing right now. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And in my recollection, it was Councillor Cole-Hamilton and Councillor Hillian maybe that did the lion's share work on that letter. So yeah, so a great team effort for everybody coming together. And I think, again, I think it's, shown some leadership and it's helped shape how our province and the federal government have even addressed the issue. So I think, again, we might get criticized by some folks for doing things that aren't necessarily in our lane or are not a municipal issue. But when we know for a fact that these climate change issues are going to cost us money, and they're causing us all sorts of storms, floods, droughts, all that kind of stuff. It certainly is something that we need to make sure that all of Canada is aware of and that we're as prepared as possible for it. All right. Again, if I don't, I think that's the questions. If I don't see anybody in opposition, I'll assume this is received in good faith and unanimously. And next we have reports and updates from council. We've been keeping these pretty brief, but I do know Councillor Moran wanted to speak about the Comox Valley Food Policy Council. So I'll maybe turn it over to you. And if any other councillors want to mention something in particular, then just let me know. So Councillor Moran. Oh, you're still muted.
Oh, I clicked it, but yeah, I'll be really brief. The report kind of speaks for itself. I decided, because we're not doing verbal reports right now, and the Food Policy Council is quite new, and I think because Lush is very closely aligned in terms of helping coordinate that council, sometimes there's a bit of confusion between Lush and the Food Policy Council. But it's wonderful that Lush is coordinating that, because they really do have the expertise in that area. So I know that the council is sending briefing notes every couple weeks to keep people in the loop of what's going on. But I just wanted to provide that summary to provide a little bit more clarity to council, and then to have it on public record as well if there's some confusion. And also just to kind of highlight the COVID related responses and how we might try to mitigate some of that going forward particularly if we have another wave in the fall, to really address some of the food security concerns and have that part of our emergency response in a more formalized way. So just kind of planting the seeds for some of that coming forward in the next little while. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Morin. And yeah, I think, as we move forward over the next month or so with the restart phase, there'll probably be some opportunity to even get some feedback from the Emergency Operations Center. There's going to be other issues like housing, that kind of stuff. So just making sure that we've learned as much as we can learn, we share that information, and then we can make the best decisions going forward. I do also have Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. Two things. First of all, I wanted to thank Councillor Morin for her work with the Food Policy Council and on food security issues. During the shutdown, our family has been ordering takeout food from Courtney businesses at least once a week. And last week, I had the good fortune to have dinner from the Atlas, which had reopened for the takeout services. And while I was speaking to the owner, who I learned is a volunteer representative of business on the Food Policy Council, and she was thanking the city for that initiative and for the services that have been provided to Lush Valley, and in the name of food security and the preparation of food for those in need during this time, and acknowledged what a timely initiative the Food Policy Council has been, and how it really proved its worth when it sprung into action during this totally unforeseen circumstance. So I thought that was noteworthy. Thanks very much.
All right, thanks very much. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to quickly report on a webinar that I attended, put on by NACTO, which is the National Association for Transportation something, which actually is an association that quite a few Canadian cities are involved in as well, like Toronto and Vancouver and Halifax. And the webinar was on creating space for physical distancing through stewardess. So I'm sure staff are aware of these of this information that's available on their website, but it was quite enlightening, and a lot of the issues that we've been dealing with and will be dealing with are also being dealt with by other cities. So hopefully we can use that resource as we move forward. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And yeah, and I know Councillor Cole-Hamilton and I have been in communication with the BIA. Councillor Cole-Hamilton probably more than myself, but we did attend a meeting with them to discuss various things and really look into the opportunities that we have ahead of us as we come out of the more or less complete lockdown that we were under. And same with the Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce, and then there's national things happening as well, both through Startup Canada and chambers, economic development, et cetera. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity out there. And again, it is great to see folks getting out there, getting their businesses back up and running. I think people, businesses, as far as I've seen, have been really responsible. And I think patrons have been really appreciative and staying positive as we start to go out and start to support our local businesses again. So it has been great to see. All right, next we have a in-camera resolution of council. If somebody would like to move that. Yeah, Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move that notice is hereby given that a special in-camera meeting closed to the public will be held May 25th, 2020 at the conclusion of the regular council meeting pursuant to the following subsections of the community charter: 91C, labor relations or other employee relations; 91E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements, if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality; and 91K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages, and that, in the view of the council, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public.
Second.
Second that.
All right, that's been seconded. And there's no questions or comments. I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton,
In favor?
Councillor Frisch,
In favor.
Councillor Hillian,
In favor?
Councillor McCollum,
In favor.
Councillor Moran,
In favor.
and Councillor Theos.
Favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. And next we have a rise and report for the COVID-19.
I'll move that we rise and report on this.
All right.
Seconded.
All right. That's been first and seconded. Any questions or comments regarding this?
I wonder if Mr. Allen might want to speak to it, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Allen, do you want to talk about this?
About which particular item? Sorry, I was a bit distracted there.
No, it's okay. It's the rise and report, the COVID-19 preliminary financial impact and tax cycle consideration.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think Jennifer Nelson would be the more suitable person to speak to this because it was her report that came before council. So I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
Okay, thank you through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So this is just the rise and report. We provided a high level analysis of preliminary financial impacts related to COVID-19. And we provided sort of 3, 6, and 9 month scenarios of some of those financial impacts might be to the city. Council reviewed those as well as the different tools that have been made available to us from the provincial government around the revenue anticipation bylaw and creating a bylaw for borrowing from our reserves as a precaution. At this point, we are going to be experiencing some losses. We don't know what that full impact is going to be yet, but we are in a good position to with our prior year operating surplus to support us through those short-term losses, but we're continually monitoring our expenses and levels of service. And through that review that council did with us, the outcome was for us to proceed with establishing a $10 million revenue anticipation, as well as drafting up an operating reserves for your consideration. So we'll be working on that and bringing it back to you in the near future. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. And Mr. Allen, did you want to add to that?
Sure, thanks. Just and thanks to Jennifer for summarizing that. I think a couple of key points really. One is that if memory serves, the previous amount or limit for the revenue anticipation bylaw was $3.5 million, and that hadn't been updated in a number of years, probably because it had never had to be used in recent memory because of the way that we've been able to conservatively, I think, manage the budget and the financial plan. So the $10 million was suggested as what I think is considered a best practice, which is to have 1 to 2 months of surplus for operating. I think that even though we're hopeful that we won't need to access that borrowing, again, it's keeping up with best practice, and we're well positioned, I think, to do that. So I just wanted to highlight those points.
Excellent, thanks very much. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just actually want to take the opportunity to thank staff, and in particular, Jennifer Nelson and her staff for giving us really great information on this and working really hard at a time when I imagine and know for a fact that capacity is low because people are staying home and social distancing, and it makes it probably a lot harder to communicate in the office. So I really appreciate that. I know most council probably does. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to the CAO for clarifying that the council has no intent of, the city has no intent of borrowing $10 million. It's just to be positioned to do so if, in fact, we find ourselves in that situation, which we all hope we won't. But I wondered if staff could also speak to the first part of the resolution that relates to the tax collection scheme bylaw, and the council has opted not to develop that. but to stick to the existing tax regime for most property classes. And if staff could just explain the rationale behind that, since it's there in the motion, but the public tuning in won't necessarily understand what is the thinking behind it. Thank you.
Mr. Allen? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Thanks, Mayor. I'll hand this over to Jennifer, other than to say that I anticipate that I've lost my train of thought. Sorry, I'm looking at 3 screens today, so I'm a little bit discombobulated. Jennifer, if you want to take over, that's just fine.
Sure. So the first part of the resolution refers to an alternative tax collection scheme. So when the province recently announced they were extending the penalty for commercial properties to October 1st, the deadline still July 2nd, we reviewed this tool in the community charter to see what the potential was for the other class of properties, the residential. So we did some research, and there was an ability to pass a bylaw to move the residential penalty out as well. However, after reviewing cash flow requirements, we determined that that wasn't in the best interest of the city from a cash flow perspective, and that really the best approach was to maintain the July 2nd deadline with penalty July 3rd for the residential properties, and then of course the businesses have until October 1st before the penalty is applied. So that is where the rationale that was in the report, so explained to council when they reviewed that.
Thanks for that. I did want to also ask, I know that we passed a resolution along with several other municipalities and sent a request to the provincial government that they extend the hardship provisions for deferral of taxes. And I'm wondering if we've had any response to that letter.
Mr. Allen? I'll just unmute.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, no, to my knowledge, we've had no response to that. What I do recall is that, and the mayor was part of this call with Minister Robinson when that question came up a couple of times at least. And the response was, I think, that 70% of residential taxpayers are already able to avail themselves of the existing programs. And that so it would only apply to the other 30%. And I think from their standpoint, they felt that given the level of effort that was required and all the other work that they were doing, that they didn't necessarily feel that that was worthwhile pursuing.
Thanks for that. I think it's important to note when we're talking about taxation that we have had mixed responses from our community. Whereas some people objected to the fact that we had instituted a modest tax increase this year in the 3% range. I've spoken to other people who see their taxes as a fair payment for the many services provided by the city. And I think it's acknowledged that that we have many excellent services that the city provides, which have continued to be provided for the most part through this very, very difficult time. And I hope that our optimism about the number of people who will be able to pay their taxes on time proves to be founded, and we don't actually have to make use of this additional borrowing capacity. Thank you.
And Councillor Frisch.
I just wanted to highlight for any of the public that might be paying attention to this, that as CEO Allen mentioned, that that tax deferral program is available for seniors and families, I suppose, at this time, and that's at the Government of BC website. So yeah, hopefully that helps those that are in need. Thanks.
And commercial companies as well for those commercial taxes. Absolutely. Councillor Morin?
Sorry, not to belabor the point, but I wanted to also put out that reminder to the public. And also that the province does collect via that program and then remits to us. So it does help with some of the capacity issues that we have, and also make sure that the city still does receive those tax dollars. And then also that, you know, we have been, you know, plugging along, trying to create some relief for folks, whether it's businesses and residents in response to COVID, and hopefully we'll be able to continue to do that. So some relief in other ways, regardless of the tax implications. Thanks.
All right, thanks very much. See no further questions or comments. Councillor Theos, if you've got any comments. And I'll take your silence as a no. So I will poll council for their vote, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
Excellent. Councillor Frisch.
In favor?
Thank you. Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
Favor.
And I'm in favor as well. And that's unanimous. And I believe that brings us to adjournment.
Move
Move adjournment.
Excellent. Did you get that, Ms. Schuertz? Excellent, fantastic.